Hey guys, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to learn about the buttons. So a button is just a UI component that you see everywhere in nearly every screen that is clickable by default, and it can react to user input when clicked to perform certain actions. So we have seen how we can use a button in the previous videos, how we can change the text of the button, and how we can make the buttons clickable. But we didn't really learn how we can customize them. And in this video, we are going to learn to do so. So let's start by dropping a button from the palette. And here, I'm going to just drop a button and go to the split mode to customize the button from the code. So the first thing I need you to know is that the button can nearly have the same attributes of the text view, because the button in the Java code extends the text view, so it inherits mostly everything related to the text view. So without repeating the same attributes that we used in the previous video, let's learn how we can use the new ones. So let's start first by changing the background of the button. So to change the background of a button, you want to use the background tint attribute. And here you can give again a color from the resources, choose your desired color. Alternatively, you could use the background attribute. Now, what's the difference between the background tint and the background attribute? Well, the background tint attribute is used to give a color or a background color to the background, just a shade of color to the background of the button. However, the background attribute is used to give a color or a drawable resource. So for example, you can put a drawable as a background to your button, and we will see this in a moment, or you can give, for example, image as a background to your button. So let's start by trying to give a color with the background attribute. So here again, I'm going to refer to the color resource and choose the color cobalt. And you see that the button does not have the round corners anymore. This is because the background attribute overrides the style given to this button by default, while the background tint only gives a color to the current style of the button. So as you can see here, the default style for the button is overridden by the background attribute. Additionally, you can see that the color is not yet applied to the button. This is because there is some weird bug, and you can fix this by just giving the background tint a value of null or at null. And make sure to change the Android here from Android to app. And you can see that the color now is given to the button from the background attribute rather than the background tint attribute. Now let's learn how we can add a drawable as a background to the button. So the first thing is to create a drawable resource. And here under res drawable, right click, choose new and drawable resource file. And here instead of selector, choose the shape. And I'm just going to name it button PG, short for background. And here we are going to create our shape. So the first thing we want to do is to open the diamond bracket. And you can see here we have a couple of attributes that we can specify for the shape, like the gradient, corners, stroke, solid, size, and padding. I'm going to first play around with the solid. And you can see here under the solid, you can give a color to the shape. And again, you can use a color from the resource or just insert your own color. So I'm going to give here a cobalt color. Then close the solid. Next, you can play around with the corners. You can see here we have a couple of attributes that we can give, like the radius, top right radius, bottom right radius, and top left radius. So let's just play around with the radius for now. Give it around 100 dp. Wait for the preview to finish refreshing. And you can see here our shape is having curved corners. And if you want to be specific about a certain corner to be curved rather than the whole corners of the shape, you can specify this with, for example, top right radius 100 dp. Only the top right corner will be curved, as you can see here. Now let's, for example, add a gradient. So you can open the gradient tag, and here we can specify the start and end color along with the angle of this gradient. For example, let's make the start cobalt and the end is going to be around purple 200. Then let's specify the angle around 90 degrees and then add the closing tag. You can see here, here's our gradient, starting with the cobalt and ending with the purple 200 at the top here. Let's just format this a little bit. Now let's go back to our button and give this background to the button. And here, instead of Cobalt, we are going to give the drawable button PG. And you can see here our button having a top right corner curved and the gradient is applied. You can also change the color of the text of this button with the text color attribute that we saw before with the text view, and here I'm gonna make it black. Now let's go back to our drawable button PG and change the whole radius, make it just a circle of shape around 100 dp. And if you now see the button, you can see it just started to take a circle of shape. And if you want that perfect circle, you can just change the width and height to a fixed value and make it a square shape around 100 dp, and here's our circle. Similarly, you can do this by specifying the type of the shape. So if you go to the shape tag here and just after the XMLNS attribute, you can specify your shape. And here you can see we have oval, rectangle, ring, and line, and rectangle here is the default. So I will specify oval, and I will just delete the corners in this case. And if you go back to see our button, you can see it's still circular shape. Now let's try to create a button that is similar to the settings icon. So I'm just going to drop another button to the screen, and here I'm going to add the background attribute, and I'm going to refer a drawable that is not yet created, and we'll make understudy create this for us. And now if you press Alt Enter, you can see create drawable resource file. Make it shape for the root element and click OK. And here we'll start by giving an oval shape to this shape. Make it oval, then we'll add stroke. And you can see here we can add the color for the stroke, the dash gap, and the dash width, which will make our stroke dashed instead of just connected line. So here I'm going to first specify the color, black for now. Then I'm going to specify the dash gap and make it around 10 dp. And for the dash width, around 10 dp as well. And finally, the width of this stroke is going to be around 6 dp. And now let's add our gradient. So the gradient will have 3 colors, starting first with the start color. And the start color here is going to be a shade of the gray color. So I'm just going to choose black here and then go to the picker and just choose somewhere around here. Then I'm going to add the end color, and again it's going to be a shade of the gray. So around here, maybe a little bit lighter than the start color. And I'm going to have a center color as well, somewhere around here. And you can see here our gradient is by default linear. We can change this type, or we can change the type of this gradient by adding the type attribute. And here you can see we have radial, sweep, and linear. So we'll make this radial, and for the gradient radius, we'll change it to around 250 dp. And now you can see here is our shape. I'll just add some customization for the start color around maybe I'll make it darker, and for the end color a little bit darker as well, and for the center color maybe around here. And here we have our middle shape, which is similar to the settings icon. Last thing we want to do is to change the color of the stroke to the end color of this shape right here, or the gradient. Now let's go back to our main activity, and you can see here our new button has the background. The only thing that we want to do is to give the same attribute that we gave to the other button here, app background tint to null. And now here's our button. Now let's just change the dimension to 250. And finally change the text to the settings. Finally, let's create a shape that is similar to the leaf shape. And for this, again, I'm going to create a new button. Again, I'm going to give the background attribute and refer to a drawable that is not yet created, and I will make understudy create that for us. So I'm just going to name it leaf pg. Alt Enter, create drawable resource file, make it shape, and click OK. And here, the first thing that we want to add is the gradient. So our start color is going to be up in the picker, and just choose a shade of the green color. Next, I'm gonna have to add the end color. Again, some shade of the green color, somewhere around here. Finally, I will make two opposite corners curve. So for this, I'm going to use the corners tag and then add the top right radius around 50 dp, and then the bottom left radius around 50 dp as well. Just wait a moment for the preview to refresh, and here is our shape. Let's go back to the main activity, and always don't forget the app background tint equal to the null value. And now the preview of your layout may just not show the actual output. So for this, go to this warning icon right here and click on the render problem, then click on refresh, and it will just refresh your layout. And as you can see here, here's our leaf background applied to our button. Now the last thing that I want to talk about before moving to create our application is the material library. So we talked about the material library briefly in the previous video, and we know that the material library is just a library that has a set of a predefined or a pre-designed UI components designed and created by Google that follow the best practices and the guidelines for creating UI components. And it was made to help us create the best possible user interfaces and have a good user experience through our applications, as well as maintain the same look and feel for our UI components across different devices with different Android versions. So if you want to have a look at the different UI components of the material library, I'll leave a link in the description below. For now, let's try out the buttons, all the different styles for the buttons from the material library. So let's just delete all of our buttons here, and I'm going to add a brand new button from the palette. And then instead of just styling this button ourselves, we will use the style attribute to access the predefined styles for this button. And you can see here, all of these styles here are predefined for our UI components, not just the buttons. We have the text appearance that we used in the previous video, along with other styles for different UI components. What we are interested about is the button. So we're just going to type the button, and you can see here we have the widget material3.button and we have widget material components button. So there are different versions of the material library. The current new version is the material 3 library. For now, let's just try the material component. So if you just add this is the default style given to any button that you add. If you want to try the other types of button, you see we have buttons outline button, just a button with a stroke and a transparent background. And if you want to check this out, try for example to give a color or a background color to your parent layout. You can see that the color background is transparent. Now let's try other button style. So we have the text button, which is just turns the button into a text, and we have the text button dialog, we have text button dialog flush, and the unelevated button, which is just a button with no shadow. And finally we have the button icon, which is just a button that accepts an icon along with the text. So just similar to the drawable left and drawable right or drawable top and bottom that we used with the text view. However, the great thing about using the button icon from the material library is that the color of the text of the button along with the icon is the same. So if you try for example to add an icon with the app icon attribute, and here I'm going to use the drawable IC download from the previous videos, you can see that both of these icon and the text are having the same color. And if you for example try the outlined button, you can see that again the button and the icon have the same color. Now if you are curious about the style or how the style was made, you can just click Ctrl and left click and get into the code for creating the style. You can see here just a style made with the styling tag. You can see if you just press again on the style, it will take you to the original code of the style. You can see it has some padding, padding left and right, stroke color, and the stroke width. And you can see that the style here extends the parent, or the style here has a parent, which is the text button. And if you go into the text button, you can see that the icon hint and the text color both having the same value, and that's why they both have the same color. So I highly suggest you to play around with the material library. I'll leave a link to the description below to learn about the different UI components of the material library and how you can integrate them within your application. Now let's move to creating our demo application with the buttons. So what we are going to do is just a simple text aligner or text alignment application. We'll have 3 buttons here at the top right of the screen, or the top of the screen. So just copy this over and paste it twice, and we will have a horizontal chain with these buttons. Chain, create horizontal chain. Now all of these buttons will be attached to the parent, and all of them will have 32 dp margin at the top side. Now finally, I'll change the appearance or the style of these buttons to use the outline text button or outline button from the material library. So again, use style, add material components button in outline and icon. Now all of them will have the same style. Now finally, I'll create the icons for these buttons. So go here, right click, new, vector asset, and the first thing is the IC center, which is going to align the button to the center, or going to align the text to the center. Next and finish. I'm going to give it to the center text here. App icon is going to be able to add drawable. Similarly for the other buttons. So I'm just going to go and do them quickly. And finally, we will add a check icon or a check mark just to notify the user about the current style or the current alignment of the text. So for this, I'm going to write check and I'm going to choose the check circle here. Now let's apply the icons to the other buttons. So the left one here is going to have icon drawable IC left. And for this one here at the right is going to have the IC right. And finally, we will have to add our text from the palette here, text view, align it to the buttons, to the parent, center it horizontally, and make it 0 dp for all sides. Finally, add some margin at the top and the edges, start edge and the end edge of the text. Here we will change the text here to be the sample text that we used in the previous videos. And I'm just going to increase the text size around 26 sp. Now, what we want to do is whenever we click on any of these buttons, we want to align the text accordingly. So here is going to align the text to the left, here to the center, and here to the right. Let's just change the texts of these buttons. This is going to be left, this is going to be right. And finally, this one here is going to be center. And you can see by default, the text is aligned to the start. And instead of giving the left aligned icon to the left, we will give it the check mark and we will change that programmatically. Left is going to have IC check. Now here is our final output. Let's now go to the code. So here within our main activity, what we're going to have is we want to first add a click listener to all the buttons. Button 6, I forgot to give them an ID. So the first one here is going to be left button. Here is going to be the center button. And finally the right button. Now here we will add a functionality to the left button, set on click listener. Similarly for all the buttons. Now what we want to do here is to change the alignment of the text. So to do this, we will refer to our text, which is just text2. And here we can set the alignment and you can also set the gravity. So the gravity is going to be gravity start. So this button is used to align the text to the left and the start here referred to the left. Similarly for other buttons. So the center button is going to align this to the center. And finally, the right button is going to align this to the right. Now we have given a check mark to the left button. We want to change the mark to the button that is currently selected or the button that is currently chosen by the user. And for this, let me just change this to end instead of right. And for this, and what we are going to do is to change the icon of the button. So if this button is not selected and it's reselected, we want to change the icon to check. And for this, we are going to make the binding left.set icon. But you can see that the normal button doesn't have the set icon function. And for this, we have to cast the left button or the normal button to a material library button with as material button and add all of these casting within parentheses. Then call the icon attribute here. And then you can set it to your drawable resource with context combat. Then get drawable. And here you have to pass the context. So we said that we will pass this as the context. And here we will pass our drawable with the R drawable IC check. After that, we want to reset all the buttons because, for example, if you selected the right button and it will be checked, we want to change the right button icon to be the right alignment instead of the check mark or the check icon. So here I'm going to reset the other buttons. So for example, the binding, or I'm just going to copy this over. The center button is going to have the center, IC center, and the right button is going to have the IC right. Now we will copy this over and paste it to the other buttons. You can see here we are typing the same code, nearly the same code in both of these buttons. So we'll rather extract this into a function that we can reuse. So here I'm just gonna cut this from here and create a separate function. Make it private and name it reset buttons. And here I'm gonna reset all the buttons all together. So the center button, the right button, make this right, and finally the left button. And now I will call this in all the buttons just before setting the check mark. So here reset buttons, again reset buttons, and here again reset the buttons. And now for the IC check, I'm just gonna add it to the other buttons. And instead of the left here, I'm gonna make it center. Instead of the left here, I'm gonna make it right. And now let's just run the application to check our result. So our program wasn't running because we have some error with the button PG here. We forgot to close the gradient. So for this, let me just close it and rerun the application. And here, as you can see, left makes the text align to the left, center makes the text align to the center, and right makes the text align to the right. So that was it for today's video. I'll leave links to the description below for the material library along with the documentation for the buttons. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.